You are watching a master at work.
The kid's back!
Taxstone has been sentenced to 35 years in prison. And the New York District Attorney decided to make a press release about it, where they announced the prison sentence for Taxstone, aka Darrell Campbell, for the Irving Plaza shooting. So it goes according, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin L. Bragg Jr. today announced the sentencing of Darrell Campbell, aka Taxstone, 37 years old, for shooting and killing 33-year-old Ronald Banger McFadder, rest in peace, a bodyguard during a confrontation at Irving Plaza. You see how they threw that in there? Like, he wasn't his goon, he was a bodyguard. And for shooting and seriously injuring 3 others. On March 23rd, 2023, a New York State Supreme Court jury found Campbell guilty of 1 count of manslaughter in the first degree, 2 counts of assault in the first degree, 1 count of assault in the second degree, and 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. Today, a judge sentenced Campbell to 35 years in prison. He's 37 years old. It's practically, he's 37 now, so I think he's been down about 5 years, so probably was like 32 or so when he was arrested. So practically longer than he's been alive is what they're expecting for him to be released, around like 60, 65 years old. Darrell Campbell used a firearm to target his rival, which led to loss of a life and serious injuries to innocent bystanders, said District Attorney Bragg. Gun violence cannot be used as a way to address conflict. The toll of guns continues to be staggeringly high, and it's horrific that a night out at a concert ended tragically. As proven at trial, Campbell, a hip-hop podcast personality, had a long-standing feud with Roland Collins, aka Troy Ave, a rap artist, over public comments Campbell previously made about his music and reputation. On May 25th, 2016, at approximately 10 p.m., Campbell confronted and threatened Collins and his bodyguard, Ronald McFadder, before Collins' performance in the Green Room at Irving Plaza. Campbell pulled out a gun and shot McFadder in the chest. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Campbell then struggled with Collins for control of the gun and shot Collins in both of his legs. Another man and a woman were also hit with gunshots during the fight. Assistant DAs Christine Keenan and Christina Awad, remember those names, handled the prosecution of this case under the supervision of Robert Ferrari. So they're giving out their shout outs in an office here, and they thanked the NYPD officers. It goes on to say, defendant information: Darrell Campbell, aka Taxstone, from Brooklyn, New York. He was convicted. These are his charges, which I read: a B felony, another B felony, 2 counts, a D felony, 1 count, and a Class C felony, 2 counts. All totaling up, he will have to do 35 years in state prison, 5 years parole, post-release supervision. So even after those 35, they still want another 5 just to make sure he is a reformed individual. God damn. Now, you would think this is the end of the Taxstone story, but in true Taxstone fashion, Tax is refusing to go away. Tax has a lot to say on this. you know. But it does make you wonder, where do you think Taxstone would be today, you know, if this situation never occurred that night? Taxstone was one of those pioneers in the podcast space now, where a lot of people are thriving. But when at the time when he came into the podcast space, the names that were known in hip hop were Combat Jack, Joe Budden Network. You had Bodega Boys. You know, you have Premium Pete. You like the podcast space was very much mocked at that time, when you have Taxstone coming into the game with his street persona and telling a lot of stories that related to a lot of people from the streets. So it was a situation where before him, people like Meek Mill and Nicki Minaj would make a mockery of Joe Budden doing his podcast. Oh, your little podcast. Like, people would say things like that because nobody really cared for podcasting at that time. So then when Taxstone came along, he completely changed how a lot of people started viewing it, because he started bringing on people like Pee Wee Kirkland. He started bringing more of the street element to it, and a lot more street dudes, you know, started being featured and doing interviews on podcasts. Meek Mill even sat down with him after they had their whole beef. You know, somebody who was early in belittling podcasts himself. So now, where you have somebody like him coming to this space, and now look, you look up however many years later, we have $1 million worth of game. We have Drink Champs. We have 85 South, right? We then you know, we have what's the one with in the South? I can't remember their name. Is going to kill me later. But either way, it's so many different platforms now where the streets are more into the podcast space, and Taxstone definitely pioneered that. That's somebody who I think you have to give a lot of, if not all of the credit for that, in terms of the way he revolutionized the space. You know, Charlemagne and the Brilliant Idiots, you know, those were all the bigger names at the time he came into the podcast space. And that's before the big Barstool and all these other companies came on. Spotify came along and started handing out these big bags for us. So imagine, he's now sitting there looking at 35 years in prison, 5 years post-release, a total of 40 years of his life. And he could have been probably sitting on $40 million instead if things just went differently. And the course of one night can change your life. The course and the events of one night. And it's not even just one night. If we be in totality, they brought up in trial how he tweeted at Troy Ave over 400 times, which is absolutely insane. Like, that was an obsession. And I'm sure he was, you know, he was getting clicks and he was getting a lot of traction off shitting on Troy Ave, but over 400 tweets, bro, like that's a different type of obsession. So if you want to believe the Taxstone narrative that everything started that night, I saw them, they didn't like that I had just been criticizing their music, so they came over and beat me up. That's one train of thought. But when they go through all of these things about 400 tweets, and then they say Troy Ave walks in there and says he confronted us, and he's lifting up his shirt and showing us that he got a gun, and we're unarmed and we're fighting for our lives, basically. That narrative paints the picture of somebody who was obsessed, like somebody who just wanted problems with somebody. That's their narrative. I'm not saying that's what I believe, but that's the narrative that they're painting. And in this press release, they're continuing that, saying that he confronted him and his bodyguard. Taxstone defense was that him and his home, that's his goon, and they go around beating up people who criticize his music. What do you believe? The jury believed the other narrative. Now, because Troy Ave has been strong with his propaganda of how events went that night. He has a lot of supporters and people who were actually even happy to hear that Taxstone got 35 and 5. People were gloating and all type of stuff online. So Tax gets back to his cell, I'd imagine, and gets a hold of his phone that he actively tweets from all the time. I don't know if he has somebody on the outside that he talks to them on the phone, or they tweet for him on his behalf. But it seems like Tax just sits up there with a tablet all day and is watching the world the way we watching the world. And he has something to say to people who thought this would be it for him. So he starts off, don't bend, don't break, don't shiver, don't shake. Follows that up with, Troy Ave's co-defendant did a great job. Manhattan District Attorney Christine Keenan, who flipped anything I said positive into a negative. Somebody said, how can he, then he goes on to follow up with, how can you testify in open court that you and your friend decided to beat me up, then beat me up, and I protected myself, and you claim self-defense? Where's the Republicans when you need them? Don't worry, my appeal will be swift. Somebody replied, fam, you gotta be cool though. You don't want to make any more enemies in the government. Keep your head up though, my guy. He already is facing federal charges as well that he pled guilty to. They just waiting to sentence him. And as Trife Gangster Banger's brother, he informed us, because of these convictions, his points now in the feds will go up, which will also affect his sentencing, which is why the feds have been waiting to see what his sentencing is. And these state charges, he has federal charges for being a felon in possession of a firearm as well. Yes. So he replied, fuck the government. Oh shit, this nigga don't care about his freedom. He don't care. This nigga said fuck the government. Or did he? Somebody else tweeted on his behalf, right? That's what they'll say in court. Dude, can you prove it was him? He goes on. Nobody will ever think they're gonna hit me with a gun and I'm gonna respond with prayer and wine. Nobody. So I don't give a fuck what New York City feel about it. They wanted me to be on a t-shirt. Nah, you be on that t-shirt. If I rely on y'all laws, I'll be Jordan Neely. Nah, beloved, I fight back, and I always am. Always safe though. Be safe though. Thank you to all the platforms that was promoting the narrative that I was a terrorist in a nightclub for views. Don't worry, I'm gonna get my views back. And then somebody said, this is where the real rumble starts, Taxstone. We here, beloved. Be safe though. So that was him just pretty much responding and saying, I understand I gotta get home on appeal. The way things are set up right now, I'm gonna do what I gotta do, and I'm gonna fight the fight. So, is this the last we've seen of Taxstone? Is he gonna turn? I mean, listen, everybody who blows trial has to have that energy, has to have that mentality, have to have that fervor. Like, nigga, I'm coming. I'm getting home. I'm shaking back on appeal, nigga. I'm hitting that lower library. I'm doing everything I gotta do to get back here. That's amazing. And, you gotta keep those spirits and you gotta keep those hopes up. And some of them actually do. Some of them actually do. So, is this the end for Tax? We shall see. 2023, He got about 30 more years on him. Will we see him in 2050? Or will we see him way before then? Next up is going to be Troy Ave. He still, even though he cooperated, he still is facing time. His next court date is June 30th. We'll see how that plays out, if he's going to be sentenced at that time. Hopefully there'll be some reporters on that one. And also, he's currently suing Irving Plaza and Live Nation for everything that happened that night. So he's got a bag on the way, especially with this conviction. He's definitely got money on the way. My prediction, Troy Ave does about 18-24 max. 18-24 months max. 18 to 24 months max. On top of, because this happened about 5 years ago. So they'll probably say they gave him 8 years. He's played it out for 5-6 years. He'll do like 18 to 24 months max. That's my call. What y'all think, man? Tax should have never brought that gun in there. Messed his whole life up that night.